Ever wonder how companies like wrangle all that data, to make those crazy accurate recommendations you see online?
Mm.
Or how about like those lightning fast search results?
Mm-hmm.
Seems like they know what you want before you even finish typing.
Yeah.
Well, today we're doing a deep dive into AWS Glue.
It's the unsung hero behind so many data-driven apps that we use every day.
We're talking straight from the source today.
Absolutely.
We're
Yeah.
diving into a research paper
Yeah.
from the creators of AWS Glue,
Mm-hmm.
giving us a peek behind the curtain of data integration.
One of the things they emphasize right off the bat is just how messy
Oh, yeah.
real-world data can be.
Oh, sure.
They actually call it a long-tail problem.
Okay.
And it's because it's not always organized neatly, in those rows and columns like a nice spreadsheet.
Right.
Imagine a library.
Uh-huh.
But instead of just books, you've got ancient scrolls mixed with audiobooks and like tweets even.
Whoa.
That's the kind of challenge they were dealing with.
So it's not just about moving data around then.
Nope.
It's more about making sense of it first.
It's about making sense of it.
Right.
Taming the chaos.
They give a great example in the paper. Even something as basic as data types in their catalog
Right.
became this huge undertaking because there were just so many formats.
So many.
It's like we're trying to organize a library, but nobody can agree on what a book even is.
Exactly. And that's where this key innovation from AWS Glue comes in. These things called dynamic frames.
Dynamic frames. Okay, so what are those? Like intelligent containers.
Yeah, you could think of them like that. Intelligent containers, they help impose order on this kind of chaotic data land.
So instead of just dumping everything into one giant digital warehouse, they're taking the time to sort it and label it first.
You got it. It's all about bringing structure to the chaos.
Okay, so how does that actually work?
Hmm.
I mean, is it like having an actual team of like digital librarians
Yeah.
meticulously categorizing every single piece of data?
You could say that. Dynamic frames, they actually play a key role in a process called schema enforcement.
Schema enforcement.
Yeah, so a schema is basically a blueprint.
Okay.
Defines the structure of your data, what kind of information each column represents, how those data types are defined, and how it all connects.
This is like before you even start the conversation, you got to make sure everyone's speaking the same language.
Precisely. And by enforcing a schema, dynamic frames make it much easier to combine data from all these different sources.
Right, I see.
Even if it arrives in wildly different formats, it doesn't matter.
Okay, so this is starting to make sense.
And this is where it gets really interesting because this ability to wrangle messy data, right,
Yeah.
it has huge implications. We're talking personalized recommendations,
Right.
fraud detection, all sorts of things.
So next time I see a suspiciously well-timed ad, I'll know AWS Glue might be involved somewhere.
It's possible.
But with all this data, we're talking massive scale here.
Oh, absolutely.
I mean, did they need, like, huge supercomputers to handle all that?
You might think so. But that's where another really cool thing comes in. AWS Glue is designed to be serverless.
Serverless? What does that even mean? How can you have computing without servers?
Right, so it's not that there are literally no servers,
Okay.
but it's about making things simpler
Okay.
by abstracting away all those complexities of managing servers yourself. Think of it like this. Instead of owning a car, imagine you just use a ride-sharing service.
Okay, I like
You
that.
just tell the service where you want to go,
Right.
and they handle everything else, the car, the driver, maintenance, all of it.
So AWS Glue is like the ride-sharing service and the data is the passenger.
Exactly. You just tell AWS Glue what you want to do with your data, like clean it, transform it, analyze it, and it just takes care of the rest.
So this serverless approach, it not only makes things easier for developers,
Way easier.
but it also makes things more efficient, right?
Absolutely. And that's what the AWS Glue team found. When they switched to serverless, developers could break those big, complex data processing tasks into smaller, more manageable chunks.
Okay,
So faster processing times, and things are just more responsive overall.
that makes sense.
They even created this feature, auto-scaling, that adjusts resources as needed.
Oh, wow.
So if a job needs more power, AWS Glue just scales up automatically and then back down when it's done. Saves a ton of resources that way.
It's like a car that magically transforms into a sports car when you need speed, and then back to a fuel-efficient model for just, like, normal driving. That's amazing.
Exactly. It adapts to what you need.
But with all that automation, with all that complexity, something's got to go wrong sometimes, right?
Well, it's true.
What happens if there's, like, a hiccup in the data pipeline? Does the whole system just crash down?
That's a great question, and it brings us to another really important thing about AWS Glue. reliability.
So they've got things in place to like keep things running smoothly.
Yeah, for sure. They've put a lot of thought into that.
Okay, good to know. But this paper also mentions these things called job bookmarks. What are those all about?
Okay, so imagine you're playing a video game, right? And you've got to stop for a bit. You don't want to start back at the beginning when you come back.
Oh, way.
Job bookmarks, it's like having a checkpoint in the game. AWS Glue can just pick up from where it left off if a job gets interrupted.
Oh, that makes sense. So you don't lose all your progress.
Exactly. Saves a ton of time and resources.
That's huge. Because I imagine with these massive data sets, even a small hiccup could mean like hours, maybe even days of work down the drain.
Oh, absolutely.
This paper mentions these scaling cliffs, though.
Yeah.
And that doesn't sound quite as reassuring as like a job bookmark.
Right. Scaling cliffs, that's like the nightmare scenario for data engineers. It's basically when the data volume suddenly spikes and the system just can't handle it.
Oh, no.
Performance plummets. Think of it like a highway, right?
Yeah.
You're cruising along, 6 lanes, everything's great, and suddenly it shrinks down to 1 lane.
Ooh, yeah. Instant bottleneck. Digital traffic jam.
Exactly.
So how do they even prevent these scaling cliffs from like bringing everything to a grinding halt?
One of their key strategies is this idea of decoupling storage from compute.
Okay, now decoupling storage from compute, what does that even mean?
Okay, so basically it's like separating the library building from the librarians. You can have this massive collection of books, right?
Right.
But you don't need a team of librarians that's equally massive just waiting around all the time.
That makes sense.
So similarly, decoupling storage and compute means AWS Glue can scale those things independently. So you can add more storage without needing to like boost the processing power at the same time.
Oh, that's smart. So they're like strategically allocating resources where they're needed most.
Exactly. Right where they're needed, exactly when they're needed.
But let's talk about the data itself for a second. We've got all these different sources, formats. It's like trying to create a universal library.
Yeah.
Everything from like clay tablets to digital downloads. How do they even wrap their heads around organizing all of that?
Well, that's where the AWS Glue data catalog comes in.
Okay, the data catalog, right?
Yeah, it's like if you can imagine a library card catalog,
Okay.
but on a massive internet scale.
So it's like a master index for their entire data universe.
Exactly. It keeps track of all the data sets.
Wow.
And the metadata for each one, where it's located, what kind of data it's got, how it's structured, even how it's connected to other data sets.
I guess that would be pretty important, especially for like developers who are trying to actually build stuff using this data.
It's essential.
Yeah.
They need to be able to find what they need.
Instead of just wandering around in the dark.
Exactly. They need that map.
But how do they keep this catalog up to date? Because there's so much data pouring in all the time.
That's where it gets really cool. They use these things called crawlers.
Crawlers, really.
Yeah.
Like creepy, crawly internet spiders.
That's right. But don't worry, these crawlers aren't here to scare you.
Okay.
They're like automated programs.
Yeah.
Their job is to scan and index all the data.
Gotcha. Lots of different places, like Amazon S3, for example.
Yeah.
Think of that as like a giant cloud storage system.
Okay, so these crawlers, these digital spiders are just like crawling through the web of data nonstop, making sure the catalog is current.
Pretty much. Super efficient.
That's amazing. But what happens if a crawler like misinterprets something? Does it mess everything up?
So to avoid those issues as much as possible, the crawlers, they use a combination of pre-programmed knowledge, right, like common data formats,
Yeah.
but they also have some smart algorithms to figure things out.
Okay.
But you're right, sometimes they need a little help.
So it's like a team effort. The crawlers do the heavy lifting, and then the humans step in for those tricky edge cases.
Exactly. It's all about collaboration.
Speaking of collaboration, this data catalog, it's not just for AWS Glue though, right?
You're right, it's not just for Glue. And that's one of the best things about it. It's designed to be a collaborative tool.
Oh, very cool.
Other AWS services can tap into it, even some external applications. So it's like the central nervous system of their data ecosystem.
That's a great way to put it. It connects everything.
But with all this data in one place, what about security? That's got to be a major concern.
Absolutely. Security is paramount. And AWS Glue takes it very seriously. The Glue data catalog, it's all integrated with AWS's security infrastructure.
Okay.
So you've got granular access controls,
Yeah.
making sure only the right people see the right data. And of course, they use encryption, both when the data's just sitting there and when it's moving around.
Like Fort Knox for data.
Exactly.
Okay, that definitely makes me feel better.
Hmm.
We've talked a lot about how AWS Glue works with all these existing data formats. But what about the future? New stuff is popping up all the time. How do they keep up?
That's a question the AWS Glue team thought a lot about. And their solution is custom connectors.
Okay, connectors. We've been hearing about those.
Yeah, and they're kind of a big deal. Think of them like specialized adapters. Each one bridges the gap between AWS Glue and a particular data source.
Okay, I get it.
But instead of trying to create connectors for absolutely everything under the sun, which would be impossible,
Yeah, that would be a lot.
they decided to open it up.
Right.
Let developers create and share their own connectors.
That's brilliant. Like it's an open source marketplace, but for data connections.
Exactly. And to make life even easier for developers, they've got these things called software development kits, SDKs for
I'd
short.
say case, okay.
They're like pre-built blocks. Developers don't have to start from scratch every time.
Oh, that makes sense. So it's faster, and it probably keeps things running a bit smoother too, right?
Exactly. Faster development, higher quality, all across the board.
This has been awesome. I mean, we started off like AWS what? And now we see how important this stuff really is.
Right. It's all connected.
It's like this hidden world quietly running everything. Those crazy accurate predictions, personalized stuff, all that data behind the scenes. Pretty amazing what they've done with AWS Glue.
It really is. It was a pleasure diving into it with you today.
And for everyone listening, next time you see something cool online, some data-driven magic, you'll know AWS Glue might just be behind it, making it all happen. Until next time, keep asking questions, keep exploring, and we'll catch you in the next deep dive.